Well, good afternoon. You tuned into the Business Wrap with me, Ntokozo Khumalo, and over the next 45 minutes, we'll take a look back into the business week that was. But before we get into that, congratulations once again to the Springboks for the magnificent comeback last night to win against England, edging them out of the finals. It was quite a spectacular finish, and now no pressure on the Springboks, but President Cyril Ramaphosa did promise to consider giving us a public holiday if we do win. So once again, no pressure, but we'll be holding the president to that. Now, back to today's business. The African Energy Week was on in Cape Town over the past week and saw global industry players and government leaders meet to unpack Africa's energy future. Now, I did speak to a few people about different angles to the energy story, from balancing the fast tracking of exploration to end load shedding to fishing communities. But first, before we get into all of that, let's take a look at some economic news that made headlines over the last 7 days.
South Africa could become the largest economy on the continent next year, surpassing Egypt and Nigeria. This is according to IMF projections. South Africa's GDP is expected to reach $401 billion based on current prices in 2024, compared to $395 billion for Nigeria and $358 billion for Egypt. It's anticipated that South Africa will only top the list for a year before falling behind Nigeria once more and finishing third in 2026 behind Egypt. Enoch Godongwana has reiterated the National Treasury's plans to carry out spending cuts during the medium-term budget policy statement in November. The Finance Minister defended the expenditure tricks before Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance on Tuesday. Godongwana says the cuts will be moderate but necessary because hiking taxes or further borrowing would put South Africa's public finances under pressure. Lower tax revenues and increased spending could leave the country's one-year rolling deficit at 369 billion rand, or 5.4% of GDP. Consumer price inflation increased for a second consecutive month to 5.4% in September, from 4.8% in August, with fuel and food prices rising. Between August and September, the fuel index grew for a second consecutive month, increasing by 7.6%, while the annual fuel inflation rate increased to 1.5% in September after spending the previous 3 months in the red.
Well, South Africa took the first steps towards the commercialization of green hydrogen, and that was on day one of the Green Hydrogen Summit, which took place out in Cape Town during African Energy Week. And we saw over the week 2 memorandums of understandings that were signed. The first saw multinationals Sasol, Anglo, and car maker BMW enter into a green hydrogen agreement, and in terms of which Sasol will supply low carbon fuel to Anglo American and BMW, and of course focusing on commercial and passenger fleets transformation. And the second agreement that we saw at that summit was with Western, Eastern and Northern Cape, and of course for the provinces to enable projects by removing obstacles such as administrative red tape and logistical bottlenecks. And France's Energy Observer is one such project that is showcasing hydrogen as a good energy source to have in a country's energy mix. Now, while we were out at the summits, I did catch up with that team, the Energy Observer team, and here's that story.
Leaving in 2017 from St. Malo, her home port, Energy Observer is sailing the seas for a round-the-world odyssey planned until 2024. After 33 days of sailing and 2,300 nautical miles covered, the laboratory vessel reached her destination in South Africa, Cape Town, back in June.
Energy Observer has arrived in Cape Town, the 80th stopover of our laboratory vessel. It has been a long navigation which required us to do some weather stopovers in Maputo, Durban and Port Elizabeth to take shelter from strong winds and big waves. The first part of the navigation has been a little bit rougher, but from Durban on we had some favorable conditions which allowed us to proceed smoothly towards Cape Town. The energy production has been ensured mainly by the sun and the wind, which accounted for a little bit less than 80% of our energy mix, and the rest was ensured by hydrogen.
The Energy Observer team says hydrogen has huge potential for a country like South Africa, struggling with its energy security.
As long as you have some wind, some sun, some geothermal, any kind of energy, if you mix them all together and you store the energy in form of hydrogen, you can be fully autonomous.
The vessel is now making its way to Brazil as part of the global tour.
Very reliable and affordable now, and the purpose of this tour is to showcase this, because when you bring an actual system, when you bring decision maker, industrials, politicians, and that they see with their eyes and they touch the system, it's a totally different impact.
He said it was a particularly difficult journey for the crew, with 4 stops to take shelter between Mayet and Cape Town due to harsh weather conditions, including strong winds and heavy seas. The 80th stopover will gather a host of institutional, industrial, and academic players committed to working with Energy Observer to make the energy transition a reality accessible to all.
Now, there were several concurrent conversations that were taking place at the African Energy Week. For South Africa, the Mineral Resources Department put the spotlight squarely on the value of future exploration for oil and natural gas and highlighted that King Coal is back, as they put it. Here's what the Mineral Resources and Energy Director General Jacob Mbele had to say on coal remaining a major part of the country's energy mix.
We believe that South Africa's energy security in the long term will depend on a mix of technologies, and that includes coal, which forms the base of our current energy supply. And we believe that by focusing on an energy mix will also drive us in the direction where we're going to have to be innovative for us to be able to meet our climate change commitments.
And South Africa is currently the only country on the continent with a commercial nuclear power plant, according to Nuclear Engineering International. However, many more African countries are eyeing nuclear power to solve electricity challenges. And the World Nuclear Association's Director General, that is Samal Bilbao Leon, says there is room for nuclear energy in the continent's energy mix, adding that future projects' profits must come back to the continent. Here's my chat with her.
We really want to focus on going from no energy to energy. We really need to make sure that these 700 million people in Africa that have minimum or no access to energy do get that access. And frankly, we need to do this in a way that is cost effective and it is equitable. So for us, we think that nuclear energy will play a very important role in Africa because it gives this opportunity to really leapfrog from where we are to a future energy system that is already clean, that is affordable, that is 24/7. Let's not forget that. So in that sense, also another very important benefit in my mind is that Africa has enormous deposits of uranium. So this will allow Africa to make sure that their energy resources are used for African countries and for African citizens. So basically, the profit of those resources will actually revert back into Africa. So I mean, our analysis show that the global supply of uranium at a global level, it is sufficient to maintain the increase in demand for nuclear energy that we are seeing. So that, of course, includes Africa. But at the same time, it means that the global nuclear industry needs to ramp up, accelerate in deploying, well, all these new nuclear facilities, whether it is actual nuclear power plants, but also the entire nuclear fuel cycle from mining, from enrichment, fuel fabrication, etc., etc.
And I'm just highlighting that you know, ensuring that it benefits Africa and the profits come back here. What are the obstacles currently that would be a challenge for that happening, and what does the continent need to do to really ensure that it strikes that right balance with the international community, but on the continent as well, to ensure that profits are coming back to the continent?
Exactly. No, I really think it's very important for the African countries, the African policymakers, to have very clear, very pragmatic, long-term plans for their energy mix. And I think it's very important that they actually think about an energy mix. We are going to need all energy sources, including, yes, nuclear, perhaps wind and solar in many occasions, but Africa will also need to use their oil and gas and perhaps hydro, many other resources that exist here. So now, I think that it is very important that when we are doing our energy plans, we think about Africa. We think about Africans. In many cases, we have seen projects where people are thinking, oh, there is an energy crisis in Europe. We need to export all this natural gas to Europe. I'm sorry. There is an energy crisis in Africa. We need to make sure that we use this oil and gas and uranium here in Africa. So when it comes to nuclear, you know that currently South Africa does use a little bit of nuclear energy, and I think that the long-term plans of the country is to continue with the existing units for 20 more years and perhaps add additional units. And also, I think that, you know, in Egypt there is currently 4 units that are under construction, and we expect they will enter operation within the next 5-6 years. So now, there are several other countries in Europe, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, that have firm plans to enter into nuclear, and then there are a few other countries that are looking at it very seriously, Uganda, Algeria, others. So what I think is very important is for all these countries, well, in many cases these countries have been working for decades already together with the International Atomic Energy Agency to actually create the infrastructure, whether it's legal infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure, some human resources, research, etc., in order to accept this technology. So obviously you cannot just put a nuclear power plant and hope that somebody will operate them, right? So we need to make sure that these countries are ready, and I think they are. So what I think we need to do now is for each one of these countries to work together with the global nuclear community to actually find the right technology for each country and to find the right financing schemes to make sure that they are affordable for these African countries, so we can actually make the most of this technology here in Africa.
Welcome back. Let's take a quick look at the business news that made headlines in the past week.
According to Teresa, in the past year, PGM prices have dropped significantly. It's blaming a weak platinum group metal price environment and the unpredictability of the global economy. In the fourth quarter, PGM basket prices were on average at a 21.5% reduced cost. PGMs are mostly used to manufacture catalytic converters, which regulate emissions in automobile engines. Registered independent resellers in South Africa can now register with Amazon after it announced the upcoming launch of a South African online store, amazon.co.za, that will go live in 2024. The global e-commerce giant is expected to shake up both the local brick-and-mortar and online retail space. Diversified miner BHP says it will let go of 2 of its coking coal units for $3.2 billion. The mines that produce the steel-making coal will be sold to Whitehaven in Australia. BHP co-owns the mines, which it exports to markets like China and India in a 50-50 joint venture with Mitsubishi Corp. Hyprop plans to purchase Table Bay Mall near Cape Town's Blobergstrand for $1.6 billion. Hyprop, which is also the majority owner of Canal Walk Shopping Centre in the mother city, purchased the retail property from Table Bay Mall Trust. As part of the deal, the group will also acquire a new solar plant currently being installed at the mall for which Hyprop will pay 23 million rand upon its commissioning. IT Group EOH has until March 2024 to replace outgoing CEO Stephen van Coller, who has announced his departure from the firm. Van Coller has been hailed for getting the company's governance structures in order after it was hit by numerous corruption scandals in 2018. The company is still in the process of recovering some 6.4 billion rand from its past leadership. The National Consumer Tribunal has ordered Vodacom to pay an administrative fee of 1 million rand. For 2 years, until March 2022, the National Consumer Commissioner says it received a large number of complaints from customers. They claimed Vodacom refused to allow them to terminate their fixed-term contracts by charging a 75% cancellation penalty.
Well, back to news out of African Energy Week. African countries, already part of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, say their neighbors could benefit from joining the organization as they speed up exploration. Now, I spoke to Equatorial Guinea's Minister of Mines and Hydrocarbons, that's Antonio Oburu Ondo, who told me that the continent could benefit from more countries joining the organization. Take a listen.
The most important things about that is that as member of OPEC and also as president of OPEC, we need to make sure that we have more members into OPEC. This is really linked to your question because the more members we have in OPEC, the more stability you're going to have in the market. And the more stability you have in the market, then you have the chance for countries to be in a better position to manage their budgets, to actually have better economic prospects, right? So it's very important to us, the OPEC message here, to enlarge the organization. And also it's very important, obviously, for every African country to make sure that they have the right environment, right, to accommodate new investment coming to our countries, right? This is one of the problems that we spoke about during the conference. We might have different sources of funding, but maybe we are not doing enough, right, to make sure that that funding can actually be accommodated in our countries.
And just talking through issues of bottlenecks, logistical bottlenecks coming up as, you know, issues throughout the continent to investments. What are some of the issues that you have noticed specifically in mining and hydro in the energy sector, those bottlenecks that really need to be removed to facilitate that investment coming in?
Yeah, well, it's a big problem, you know. I don't want to get very political and very academic about this. The most simple things to me is that governments and companies, institutions, we need to make sure that we facilitate everything to make sure that people have access to the energy that we have that is easily available to us, right? So it's all about organizing our economies. It's all about making sure that we have the right environment.
And it's the balance of exploration and climate change, ending energy poverty. Where does exploration of oil still sit for the African continent, the potential that it still presents even as we drive towards greener energy?
I'm happy and sorry at the same time to come back to the OPEC, right? OPEC is being very vocal since June this year about energy transition and about the fact that energy transition need to put at the center of everything the need of the people, right? And that's why Africa is also in line with OPEC talking about energy poverty. Whatever we do about all this, we need to make sure that we take energy poverty in the center of the debate so that people have access not to the wind energy or not to solar energy or not to fossil fuel. People need to have access to the sort of energy that they have access to in a very easy manner, in a very affordable manner. So that's the simple take from Equatorial Guinea.
Well, we'll hear a little bit more about removing those logistical bottlenecks a little bit later on in the segment. But first, while deeper cooperation in the energy sector was the theme of the week at the African Energy Week, the reality of those rising geopolitical tensions was also a key focus. Now, the United States Department of Energy said although the continent has enough reserves to power up the world, each country must be given the room to develop its own sovereign energy strategy. And the department's Deputy Secretary Assistant for Europe, Eurasia, the Middle East and Africa, that's Joshua Volz, gave me some more insights.
As Africa plays a critical role in the world's energy transition and the renewable energy revolution that we seek to see as we look to decarbonize energy systems, provide additional energy access, and help our African partners gain in economic and energy security. So in terms of the partnership that we're here talking about, the partnership really needs to be built upon a new model of collaboration and cooperation, one that helps our African partners achieve what their goals and their aspirations are, and in a way that's sustainable and enduring and helps our African partners climb the economic value chain with the resources that they're so richly endowed with.
And now, building those partnerships or those relationships, Africa is quite different as you go region to region, country to country. So how does that play out when Africa itself has to deepen those relationships, find a sovereign voice or strategy for their energy sectors, but also work with the likes of US and Europe and so on?
No, that's right. And look, it's an incredibly diverse set of partners and an incredibly diverse set of challenges. And first and foremost, we need to meet our African partners where they are and help our African partners achieve the aspirations that they have for energy access, economic growth and development, and decarbonization. Secondly, I think there's a lot to be said for the ability to partner with different regions in Africa to develop and underscore the various strengths and comparative advantages that those African partners have. They are very, very different, and the energy transition and the economic development goals for those partnerships is going to be unique. And so we're really looking to figure out how we, from a U.S. perspective, can help facilitate and accelerate the goals that our African partners have.
And just that balancing act between balancing, further exploration and balancing the green economy and going green. How do we work that? Because some of the pushback is that a lot of our jobs are still in the more traditional side of things, in the fossil fuels and so on, and that we really should be scaling to green energy per country. So how do we negotiate around that?
Well, look, it's a matter of a yes and conversation, not a yes or conversation. We need to move in parallel as African countries seek to use the resources at their disposal to increase energy access and gain in economic prosperity. We want to be able to be there as partners to help them do that in a greener and cleaner and more efficient manner. An energy mix is going to involve a lot of different sources of energy, but there's no reason that that has to come at the expense of decarbonization goals, energy access and just energy transition goals, and the ability to deploy renewable energy at scale.
Now, as we heard earlier on in the segment, logistical bottlenecks remain one of the major obstacles to trade and industry development on the continent, and a serious consideration for the energy sector. Now, Africa Global Logistics, a leading operator of port, sea and rail in Africa, says it's working tirelessly with other stakeholders to remove some of these hurdles. I did catch up with Kenneth Den Aniam, who is the chairman for Nigeria, for more.
As connected as we should be, and basically what we're trying to do is to bring goods and services nearer to where they're needed. Now we have to leapfrog the lack of infrastructure, or at least lack of good infrastructure, as good as they should be. And so the goal of AGL is to try and bring those services, those goods that speed up the economy, closer to where they're needed. That's the primary objective. Of course, to do it in a green way, we have developed logistics bases, and what we try to do with these bases is also to integrate them. So, for example, multi-services in each base, not just transit points for goods and services, but things like fabrication, things like training schools, put them all together in each base. And we're developing, multi-bases across the continent. So the idea is to make sure that we aid the speed up of trade and services across the continent. That's the basic goal.
And just across the continent, are we seeing different kind of supply chain issues? I know you just set up in Angola, you have a cold storage that just opened up. Do you see that we have different pockets of issues on the continent or across the continent? It's the similar kind of bottlenecks?
It's basically similar because the main problem cuts across the continent, which is infrastructure deficits. Okay, so it's across the continent. And what we also see is that even when you have the good infrastructure, the human factor, like you have customs across boards, paperwork. So we need a little bit of education for even the movement of goods and services when they get to. A lot of times the guys at the customs, they're doing their work. But we at AGL, that's why we set up the training for our own, for example, drivers and people who actually move our services to be on top of their game when they come to these borders. Your papers must be correct. So you give less trouble to the customs. Of course, the customs themselves need to man up to their responsibilities and make sure that they are not a hindrance to the free movements of goods and services.
And obviously this week the focus has been around, just fast-tracking, adding green energy into Africa's energy mix. Is there any kind of different requirements that are needed around the energy space when it comes to fixing those infrastructure bottlenecks?
Unfortunately, infrastructure is bang on the doorstep of governments. And of course we can assist, but the primary objective, the primary responsibility is on the doorstep of governments. And the best we can do is to do our own part, which is bring in technologies that are able to, make sure that these goods and services, are optimally delivered to the clients. And we're constantly, there's something we're working on which I can't reveal at this moment, but it's going to quite revolutionize the way we do business, and it's probably going to be the only one for years to come. But at the appropriate time we'll release that.
Well, we hope. Now, of course, being able to build those stronger working and profitable relationship in Africa's energy sector takes the implementation of policy and legislative frameworks that take into account the energy crisis, energy transition, as well as the decarbonization of the energy supply. And on the sidelines of the African Energy Week, I caught up with Grace Yella, a tax director with the Pan-African Legal and Business Advisory, that's Centurion Law Group, who's got extensive experience in the energy sector, specifically in oil and gas, and she shared her thoughts on the continent creating an enabling environment for investments in the energy sector.
So many countries are in the business to make things right. Making things right, what does that mean? Our regulators are trying to put things together to encourage investors. Because truth be told, Africans are just this where they are now, they cannot really do a lot. So what we need is investors to come into Africa and give us that push to develop some of these natural resources which we have that will improve the supply and the quality and the capacity of energy supplies that we have in the continent. So, like today, we had the Minister of Equatorial Guinea for Mines and Hydrocarbons who said there's a lot going on. For example, they signed a bilateral agreement with Cameroon. There is another one, I think, they signed with Nigeria. So we can see that our regulators, our government officials are putting in a lot of effort to make things right so that some IOCs in Europe, in America, in Asia can rush here and then give us that push to make some certain adjustments in the energy sector.
Well, let's take a quick break from the African Energy Week and take a look at company news that made headlines this week.
Building materials retailer Cashbuild says it recorded a 4% drop in revenue for the 3 months ended in September. Inflation hit earnings and higher interest rates have forced cash-strapped South Africans to scale back on home renovations and building projects. Cashbuild says the income for its 312 existing stores decreased by 2%. The company's shares are down more than 3% on the JSE today.
Most of the segments are relatively flat, except for the P and our hardware South Africa business. Side revenue was down about 2%, and that accounts for about 17% of the portfolio. So I guess that's the one that probably needs fixing. And I guess we'll get more detail when we actually see the results.
Pick n Pay saw its shares plummet more than 13% after reporting a R500 million in losses. The retail group withheld its interim dividend, reporting losses of R571 million for the 6 months to August. Pick n Pay says prices remained high, reporting an internal selling price inflation of 8.3%. The company was hit by abnormal costs, including energy and employee restructuring expenses. Its budget grocery chain of Boxer stores grew sales by 16% to R17.4 billion.
Results came in and were considerably more disappointing than what we thought they would be. Pick n Pay commented themselves that they are not exactly happy with the results either. We saw that trading profits were down almost a full 100%, despite the fact that group turnover was up about 5.4%. So not a very strong set of results from them at all. They did also give guidance yesterday, post-markets close, that the earnings per share figures, the headline earnings per share and or loss per share rather, in this case, would be sort of between the 128 or R1.28 and R1.09 a level in the case of the loss per share, and that was as a result of them being able to conclude the reporting on that Zimbabwean business, that TM Supermarkets business. Obviously, they have to account for it under a different accounting standard because it is reporting in hyperinflation economies, so that there is a different accounting standard that deals with that, and they were just finalizing that.
Paper and packaging multinational Mondi says low prices and weakened demand have hurt its business. In a trading update, the company reported a 42% drop in earnings before tax. Mondi says kraft paper, mostly used for packaging by e-commerce platforms, recorded a sizable price drop. The company expects the weak business conditions to prevail for the rest of the year. Mondi's London-listed shares fell in nearly 6%.
First of all, the update hasn't been particularly well received. The stock is down 6% today. But if, the EBITDA is down 42% from the year-on-year number compared to this quarter a year ago. But I think a little bit of context is needed. In last year, there was a lot of over-ordering coming out of COVID. There was a lot of supply chain challenges and issues, and companies tended to over-order and overstock on inventory. And that is a process that needs to unwind. So they're actually under-order now. We're seeing that order book unwind. And of course, we know the global challenges. The global economy is slowing. They are seeing some of that order book decline. So the container board sector, one of their major sectors, that's doing well. Prices are stable and the order book is rebuilding. But in the kraft paper, they are seeing declining volumes and orders and pressure on prices.
Tiger Brands expects earnings to come in lower compared to last year. The maker of Albany bread and Black Cat peanut butter says the input costs have remained high, with its retrenchment process costing R10 million. The company's shares were up by more than 13% after the announcements.
But the trading statement is not exciting at all. I mean, I think their earnings would be between 5% down and 2% up. So really, you're probably looking at 2% down. But I think what they highlighted in the trading statement was that the groceries business is under a lot of pressure, but the personal care market was relatively strong. I think the biggest news that came out was that the CEO was exiting, Neil Doyle, and a new CEO has been, or interim CEO has been appointed.
And we also got a chance to catch up with former Dutch professional football player and manager, and of course that is Clarence Seedorf, who says that Africa's potential for socio-economic equity and economic inclusion lies within and will take an effort from all the industries in the economy. Now, the Global Black Impact Foundation that he chairs held a session at the African Energy Week to unpack those complexities, and we did get a chance to also catch up with him at the sidelines of those events.
Well, the Black Impact Foundation has now almost 4 years of life, but much longer, because the purpose from my side really comes from the day that I shook hands with Madiba. Nelson Mandela has, had such an impact in my life and for my purpose, beyond my parents, of course, who helped me make me what I am today. But that goal of looking for world peace and looking for, supporting our people has been always on the agenda. And a few years ago we have really taken a step further. We have created Black Impact Foundation with a very clear mission, is to unite our global community. We have a lot of people globally, but we're not really united, so that's why we are putting it in the way we're saying. We are looking into the diaspora, Africa diaspora. We need to be communicating with each other, we need to be supporting each other, we need to come together and also showcasing all those people of excellence in the different sectors in the world. We have them already. Some people want to say we need to change the narrative. We say we are the narrative already. Some people are saying we need to empower our people. We say we need to unlock the power of our people, which is a different wording. And I hope we can start really educating, ourselves in using that. We don't need to be empowered. We need to be just having the opportunity to show our power.
Yeah, and to show that power, Clarence, it does take some work. And I think particularly on the continent, as we discussed, it's the issue of the trust deficit, but also driving that inclusion that becomes a lot more equitable. And it's not just the energy industry that could help facilitate that. Talk us through then, the different industries coming together, even sports, entertainment really on the continent to help drive that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right about this. We are here because the Energy Chamber and Black Impact Foundation are partners now. The Energy Week is a fantastic movement, as Anja Ayuk, the executive chairman of the chamber, has outlined very clearly yesterday. And with this movement, it's clear, even more clearer now, how much we can do as a sector. So imagine now if we are using, as you said, also the sports sector, art, fashion, and other sectors, and if we can bring them together. And that is what we have done as a foundation in the last year. This year we have the 3rd edition of the summit, the Global Black Impact Summit. That is the platform where we can bring all these sectors together, because we cannot expect from the energy sector to be busy with the fashion. But we can support, we can have that connection, we can have them sponsor, we can have them build infrastructure for the sports industry. There are so many things that can be combined, but there has to be an entity who can support with that, who can create those partnerships, who can execute that vision. What we expect is that each sector is putting this mission as a priority. Our people need to have the basic human rights in place. And here on the continent is very clear. 600 million people don't have access to energy. That is something that is unacceptable. And therefore, we are here as a foundation to support the energy sector to make that happen.
Well, we've come to the end of this week's segment, but there's plenty on the diary on the business days for the week that is coming ahead. Tomorrow, Transnet's chairperson of the board of directors, that's Andile Shlangu, will outline the work done by the board since coming into office back in July, as well as some of the initiatives underway to stabilize the organization and improve operational performance. We'll bring you details on that tomorrow. In statistics, South Africa also has some data out this week, including food and beverages, business liquidations for September, tourist accommodation for August, as well as the financial statistics of higher education institutions. And that's interesting data as we head to the holiday season, but also a new year for matriculants applying for higher education institutions. There's also data out on the country's money supply as well as private sector credits. And on the company news front, we have some corporate earnings that will be out from the likes of Clicks, Famous Brands, and South 32. So a lot on the go in the week, so do join us. Dumisang Ndlovu will start off the week with you and joins you from 6 a.m. tomorrow on the AM Report. Thanks for staying with me over the last 45 minutes. It's goodbye for now.